I'm Kristian Anderson, Executive Director of Louisville Visual Art. Welcome to our series where we come and talk to artists in their studios or gallery spaces. I'm lucky today to be with Tom Cannady. Thank you.
Hi, Kristian.
How are you doing?
I'm well.
And Tom has been an incredibly sort of gracious person introducing me to Louisville since I'm new here. One of the first people I actually met in passing on, I think, the first week I was here. And I've been fortunate enough to go see his studio, and it's great to sort of share this space. We're in Core Gallery. But Tom, it's really exciting for me to be here because the first time I saw your work, there was nostalgia to me. And I think that one of the things we've been asking all the artists is, where do they get their inspiration from to take something from their head and put it on a canvas?
Well, I think a lot of my inspiration comes from vintage photographs, and that stems from childhood experiences with both sets of grandparents who had these enormous picture boxes full of photographs. And I always wanted to look at the photographs when I stayed overnight at Grandma's house. And, my dad's mother was the first one that showed me that picture box, and we would just go through picture by picture, and she would tell the stories of the people in the photographs and what was going on, and I found that fascinating. And so I told my other grandmother, Grandma Cannady, has a big box of pictures. Well, I've got pictures. So we would sit down and look at those pictures. And I'm always, when I look at an old photograph, I'm always wondering what's going on in the background and where are these people now? What else is going on just outside of that frame? And I like the stories that go with photos.
So these aren't the inspiration for these isn't directly your lived experience, but what it is it's sort of looking through, images or collections from particular time periods, and you sort of extrapolating a narrative to them.
Yeah.
So, is some of it bring upon? Does any of your own sort of lived experience come into this, or is it really just sort of a, I don't know how we deal with Hollywood or Madison Avenue or wherever the pictures come from?
The majority of the pictures now come from several blog sites I subscribe to, and they just send pictures every day, and I'll flip through 12 or 15 and click 2 or 3 to keep, just save, and I may do something with it, or I may do something with a portion of it. I've combined photographs before. In commission work, I've used some photographs for historical reference and helping with the composition of the commission piece.
For most of your work that I've seen, I feel like a lot of them are sort of action shots or moments in progress, more than like a posed portrait. So is there something that draws you to sort of, I guess you're saying, what is that action sort of off of the image, which, for a portrait session, I suppose is more relevant. So there's really something, is there a challenge to sort of capturing that particular moment in time?
Typically, what I include in a piece is a vehicle of some sort, and that automatically seems to date the piece, because particularly 50 years ago, cars changed every year, the models changed, so you can tell by the make of the car how long ago this happened, a lot of times.
So how did you become an artist? Were you always a professional artist, or did you have a particular set of training and then sort of come into being an artist later? Or
I think there was when I was in the first grade, there was a classmate of mine who was an exceptional artist, and she did beautiful drawings. And I guess I was just captured by that, and I said, I want to do that. And so I started drawing and painting. I had won some ribbons and things, in elementary school, that sort of thing. So it encouraged me. And then when I started junior high school and through high school, I had a teacher who started her first year of teaching the same year I started 7th grade. So we ended up going through all of the years together, and she was a phenomenal mentor and someone who I greatly admire.
So, I mean, the impact of teachers, the impact of classmates. I know we're here talking about your practice and a little bit of Open Studio Weekend, but it also sort of touches back to the importance of like CFAC and academies and programs that kids who start and get inspired by art and start that training when they're young, have opportunities to be critical thinkers and tackle problems in a different way, and heaven forbid make a living as a professional artist. So, despite what parents might tell you, just kidding, parents.
So I started at Murray State University as an art major and went through 3 semesters of that, and then was, basically we came to the point where what are you going to do with this art degree? Most people were saying at the time about the only thing you can do is teach, and I didn't think I wanted to be a teacher, so I ended up with a marketing degree instead. And I didn't really pick up the painting again until probably 20 years later.
So your work is definitely sort of based on, like you said, images that are real, and there's a narrative structure to these, but they're not like you're not shooting for photorealism in this. Like everything is a little bit fuzzy, a little bit abstracted. Do you think that allows either you or perhaps a viewer to, I don't know, fill in the blanks and have it be more accessible, or what? I mean, how did you sort of end up at this sort of tension between styles, I guess?
I think part of it is I remember seeing some super realistic paintings when I was in college, and I really liked that style, but I really don't have the patience to do that. So I decided, I love color, and I like to work with a lot of color. That's more, and that's part of working with the black and white photographs. I get to choose the whole color palette.
Sure. Yeah, like Technicolor.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, a lot of stuff for any artist is about editing, and I think that anytime you do a studio crit or in a lot of different professions, less is more, knowing when to stop, right? And so I think that is there something internal where you hit it and you're just like, okay, I know I've conveyed this versus overwork, because your stuff certainly isn't overworked, and it tends more towards the less is more, I would say.
Part of that comes under, okay, I'm tired of working on this one, I want to start something else. It's done. And then I may go back a year later and say, well, especially if I hang it over the fireplace where my television area is, and I'll just stare at it for months, and this could use some work, this could use some work. I make a list of things to check off.
So it's never truly done until you've released it into the world.
And even that, I've pulled it back and
how do you feel like when people have looked at your work in the past and we invite people into the studio, what seems to catch the general public? Is it the particular cars or vehicles, or is there something that you find people grab onto more than other?
More of the mood of the piece and the sense of humor involved in a lot of the pieces. The titles sometimes catch people. Sometimes I have the title before I have it. As soon as I see the image, I have the title.
So Tom, I want to circle back a little bit to sort of narrative and lack thereof, and people's desire or need to fill an image with narrative. Grant was talking about the Mona Lisa and how one of the reasons why it's enduring is you can look at the Mona Lisa, and every time you look at it, you think there's a different reason for her smile. There's a little bit of enigmatic quality to that. When you're choosing images and when you're to work with from the front end, and then sort of how you present those images, are you looking for things that are a little bit more didactic, that seem to have a more fixed narrative, or are you looking for some of those things that might be a little more enigmatic, where there's something happening but you're not entirely sure, and you could, every time you come back to it, write an entirely different story?
Absolutely, and I do that. I tend to lead the narrative with the title of the piece. And I have changed titles of pieces depending on where they're going to be shown.
Interesting.
And I think I did that at a show last fall, and a piece sold. And I think a lot of it had to do with just changing the name of the piece. It was more relevant to that area than the title I had on it before.
Interesting. So the image and both the start and the production is a little bit open ended, but then tying it into giving people a hook for an intention, whether it's your intention or not, or just giving them something to create and fill in that narrative. Tom, you said you're using photographs as images. There's the background, the foreground, where your focal depth is can change. And so if I'm looking at this piece, the background is dark but pretty well gone. This one is light but pretty well gone. This has a minimum of a horizon line, but there's not a lot there. And so the depth of field is very forward on all of these. This one, and I mean, I feel like the horizon line and sort of that western goes with the cowboy hats, and you really sort of needed that to drive the narrative of the picture. I don't know, is that?
A lot of times the backgrounds are so complex in the images that it just detracts from what I want to be the focus.
Which is the people and the cars, or the vehicles, I should say. Yeah, because I was thinking about this one specifically, and she's in cowboy boots, and the halos around their heads without that background could more be halos than hats. Like now they read as cowboy hats because I get a western side in that, but without that, it really sort of needs that to me to inject that narrative that I see. And that again is my supposition. I also lived in Utah and the West for a long time, so.
That image came from a friend of mine, and he just sent it to me, thinking that, you might want to try this sometime. And it was actually his mother and a friend of hers, and they were on a dude ranch.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had the image so long, I had forgotten that he gave it to me. And couldn't remember if it came from one of the block signings. As soon as I posted the progress on it, he said he loved it for more reasons than he could tell me.
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful composition. It's centered, and the way that the legs work, it really balances out the photograph. So, yeah, I mean, whether it's your painting or the photograph that you work from, it's a great composition.
Thank you.